Hello, thanks for joining us. This is the 11th broadcast of the PBC Morning Dawn Study Group from Padma Samiling in New York, the Venerable Khenpo Rinpoche's retreat and monastery here. So today we'll be discussing chapter 11 of the Khenpo Rinpoche's book, The Buddhist Path, which is entitled Meditation, Posture, and Breath Purification. So we'll just do brief opening prayers first, and then we'll begin our discussion. Thanks again. Om Ojin Yujin Jansang Dema Geza Dompola Yazin Jugin Juni Bema Junye Jesura Kodu Kandro Mangago Jeji Jesu Dam Juji Jinji Lobje Jesu So Guru Bema Siddhi Samantabhadra, Bhadrasattva, Pramadavadra, Sri Singha, Dhammakara, the 25 king and subjects, So, Sur, Nun, Yang, and the 100 Tirthans and others, the lamas of the Kama and Terma lineages, to you I pray. The supreme tradition of the glorious Buddha Padmasambhava, which is the essential, extraordinary view and doctrine of the early translation school, you keep alive and spread by the light of wisdom. Lord of Dharma, great Khenpo, I pray at your lotus feet. In the palace of the old man Dharmadhatu, the essence of all the Buddhas of the three times, the one who shows clearly the Dharmakaya of my own mind, we pray to the Honorable Root Guru, glorious Root Teacher, precious one, dwelling on the lotus seat and the crown of my head. Hold me with your great kindness, and bestow the accomplishments of body, speech, and mind. Om Aravasanadi, Om Aravasanadi, Om Aravasanadi, Om Aravasanadi, So we begin chapter 11 on page 55. This is meditation, posture, and breath purification again. And I'll just quickly do a brief summary of Rinpoche's teaching in this chapter on the posture section. So in the beginning, the first paragraph, Rinpoche say that when meditating, it's important to keep the body, speech, and mind balanced, and that the body has these three components, channels, wind, and essence element. And by keeping these three components balanced, then the mind itself will be balanced as well. Then secondly, that when the channels are aligned, then the wind is aligned, and then the mind is aligned, and we can do this mainly by maintaining a good posture to keep the channels straight. And Rinpoches go over the 7-point posture of Buddha Vairochana, and these are essential instructions for how to have this straight posture. So the first instruction is to cross your legs in the lotus or Vajra posture. Then second, to keep the back span straight like an arrow pointing up to the sky. Thirdly, it's about the position of one's hands. Either they can be in the equanimity mudra, or you can rest your hands on your knees with palms down. Fourthly, to keep your elbows rounded without touching them to your sides. Fifth, to keep the neck straight. Sixth, to have your eyes looking forward and down towards the tip of your nose without blinking or moving your eyes too much. And then seventh, to have your tongue touching the roof of your mouth with your lips slightly parted. So in the chapter there's really specific instructions for each of these points, but this is just like the bullet points of those. So then we'll go to this first discussion point.
This is page 55, the first paragraph. When meditating, it is always important to keep your body, speech, and mind balanced. The body has three principal components: the channels, the wind, and the essence element. If these three components are well balanced, you will feel healthy and comfortable. First, the channels need to be properly aligned by maintaining good posture. The main points of good posture are known as the 7-point posture of Buddha Vairochana. If you use these postures when you meditate, your meditation will be stable and smooth.
I had a question about just how they say that the body, speech, and mind are related to the channels, the wind, and the essence element. And just wondering what you all think about how speech is related to wind. Just like, what do you think about that?
So here we can definitely see that I think body, speech, and mind are something that we all share, all sentient beings, right? So body is the grossest, most apparent level, and then mind is the intangible, formless, subtle, like most subtle, non-apparent level. And then in between is this fluid, flexible, subtle, this subtle level, which is speech or wind. And so we have all sentient beings have body, speech, and mind. And then wind is, in one way they talk about it as what connects the outer to the innermost, or what connects this apparent gross level phenomena, what provides the moving energy, and then connects it to this formless, intangible mind. So then how speech is related with wind. I mean, I think there's a lot of instructions and it's a big topic. But it's that movement component, and sometimes it's related with circulation in the body or respiration. They say
It's like the breath.
The breath, and release it, yeah.
So breath is like wind, or like the outer wind that we see, like we think of wind in the air.
Yeah.
And then similarly, maybe speech is like the air moving in our body, so then we can call it wind.
Mm-hmm.
And also they say too, like in general, it's a movement of the mind, actually, that gives rise to speech. Based on a subtle movement in the mind, that's the wind, actually.
This moving.
So all the syllable is actually wind. That's why they say, it is a huge big topic, but like from the unborn ah syllable, which they say is the basis of all the other syllables, and also represents the nature, there's like a stirring of movement or wind, and that, basically they say, actually all speech is the syllables, is symbolic movement of syllables that are imbued with meaning based upon the subtle movement of wind in the body, through the channels. That's manifest externally. Mm-hmm. So it's really interesting because words, thoughts, concepts are all a stirring of wind in the mind, which gives rise to, moves through the channels, mm-hmm. and comes out as a verbal, symbolic, sound that has meaning based upon language and all these other things. So it's like mind, it's like the subtle stirring of mind manifests. That would be, you could say, if we broke it down into again, it's a huge topic, but the central channel would be the mind, or the Dharmakaya. The white channel, because we saw this in the previous chapter too, the white channel would be the Nirmanakaya, or the channels would be the Nirmanakaya. The white channel would be the Nirmanakaya, the red channel would be the Sambhogakaya, and the blue central channel would be the Dharmakaya. And from the unborn Dharmakaya ah syllable comes the manifestation of speech, which is the more subtle Sambhogakaya form, emanating as Nirmanakaya letters and sounds. And so it's really, anyway, I just thought that's what I was actually looking at before we started this. Too.
It's just interesting, I hadn't thought of it at all that way until you said it, but thinking about how as the mind moves, like, of course, I mean, we know, like, our minds are moving in so many varied ways, and then, if we picture the mind as a sphere, and like, it's being moved, and what happens generates different changes in the wind, and then that produces a different sound. I mean, you could say it like a sound, or, you know, it's almost just like the wind takes different shapes based on how the mind is moving. Could you say it that way?
In the channels and like in the previous chapter when they talk about humans have like such a particular structure of their channels and winds and essence elements that's why we perceive things different from like an ostrich or something else that has a different configuration of channels, and so
yeah.
But they definitely like, it comes back to this whole balance point. Like if the channels are balanced,
right.
If the channels aren't balanced, the wind won't be balanced. The wind's not balanced, the speech won't be balanced, and the mind won't be balanced either. So it's like.
So that's why it's good to start with this more outer level, which is the posture. You know, getting the proper posture. I mean, they did talk about that a little bit in that last chapter. Getting the right posture really automatically sets things up for the winds to flow more smoothly. And then, because the winds are flowing more smoothly, then the mind will be more settled and clear in all the different things that it can be, but that aren't like disturbed, basically.
Totally.
Or karmic, so they make that in the previous chapter 10, the big distinction between two types of wind, karmic wind and wisdom wind. Another way they talk about it is impure wind that's influenced by our grasping of mind, or pure wisdom energy or wisdom wind, which is the natural, calm way that our mind functions and expresses itself when it's really balanced, when it remains in its nature. Then that mind expresses itself with wisdom. And so it's good just to highlight again that distinction, this karmic wind versus wisdom wind, because like they move differently depending on if it's a karmic wind or a wisdom wind, but what about it is different, and it's definitely, like you said, related to, well, what is it moving through? The channels. And then where is it coming from? Is it coming from, so if we go to the outer, we see the channels which influence the movement, or if we go more from the inner, we see our mind, is it really balanced? And thus the expression is really wisdom? Or is it really disturbed or unbalanced, and then the expression is really scattered and kind of, you know, tightened and twisted in various ways that our karmic habitual patterns do and emanate.
I have a question about this. So I think it's good to know about how the posture influences the channels, and then how that influences the winds, and how that then influences the mind. But as a beginning meditator, I don't have any experience of any of that.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if there's a different way you can think about the posture as maybe exercising mindfulness, like being mindful of what posture you are in, and then noticing when you lose it and go back into it and engage that process.
I mean, I think your question hits on a lot of really special points. Like, say we received an instruction from our teacher, and they said, sit this way. But they didn't say anything about why. They just said, do this. This is what the teacher said. This is the way the teacher taught, my teacher taught me, and now I'm just going to repeat the thing, because that's what I've learned and it's worked. Like, that's what... And so, even if we don't know really why it works, there's still a lot of merit in receiving a particular instruction, of course, from these great realized masters. And then just applying it, even if we haven't even heard anything about winds or channels or anything like that. And I think in a lot of contemplative traditions, like, it's like that. It's like, in the beginning, like here we are in like chapter 11 of this book, so the Rinpoches have already covered quite a bit of ground. In the beginning, if you were to meet a teacher and they're like, give big explanation about why you just need to sit on your cushion and with a straight back, then for a lot of people it'd be overwhelming and uninteresting and probably would like cause them to not want to sit that way at all. Could be. So, but here we are kind of little midway through at least this book. And so they're kind of filling in a little bit of the why, with at least in this, and this is so subtle, like this is such a subtle level topic. I mean, just the way the outer really, how does it really connect with or interface with the innermost, the mind? But that's just one thing that comes to mind, that even if we don't know why it works, there's still an instruction it's very practical. Like you sit this way, cross your legs this way, hold your hands in this way, straight back, neck. And if we do it, regardless of whether or not we know why it helps us feel balanced or unbalanced, it'll still have that effect. If it actually is relating to this subtler level that actually is influencing the movement on that level.
Yeah. And that's what, and I think, like, in terms of your question, I think you have a lot of experience with this, actually. A lot of experience with how posture affects mind states. Like, even, for example, working on a computer, or which we all do, or, you know, there's the posture, there's the iPhone posture. That's like, but you know, it's like, if you're working on the computer every day, and you have good posture, and you sit up straight, and you have more ergonomic, even though that's more, slightly different, but you know that at the end of the day, you'll feel better, you won't have as much prone to, you know, aches and pains, doing that over and over again. And I think it's similar too, because your channels are more, you know, balanced, and same as if Khenpo Sewang, he said fairly recently, oh, like, for example, if we sit in front of the TV eating, what did he say, Doritos? We look like a refrigerator, you know. He said, then if we're doing that, you know, obviously, you know, like, this is the samadhi of eating chips and watching TV, which we, you know, definitely, we do. But anyway, how that affects the, you know, that affects one's state of mind. That affects one's, you know, samadhi
and just like that seems to bring it around to what you asked, which was, it affects your state of mind. And I mean, I think for most of us, like sitting eating chips in front of the television, it's like mindless. You know, there's just a certain level of dullness that's going on there. The thing for people is relaxing, and it's just some way of like,
fun,
yeah, it can be fun and relaxing, but I think in terms of the mind, like, it's just pretty like low level, you know. But so then paying attention to posture is a great way of being mindful, and I think it's like one of the things that sort of happens automatically as, I think, as a beginner, definitely, and I mean continually through along the path. But so I mean, I would think yes, it's a great way to work on mindfulness. It's just kind of holding proper posture,
And it's, I think, really directly related to with this Buddhist teachings on 4 foundations of mindfulness.
That's what I was thinking too.
So we need, if we're focusing on something or concentrating on something, the outermost one is, of course, phenomena, objects, and then a little more inner is body, our own body. Then a little more inner is the physical sensations going in our body. And then the innermost is our own mind, being mindful of our own mind, our ideas, our thoughts and emotions. The easiest thing to focus on is outer objects, which we're all doing all the time, but not really with much mindfulness, with a lot of grasping. We want that, don't want that. But then if we bring it in more to our body, like you said, it can be an exceptionally profound meditation technique. I mean, it was one of the essential techniques that Buddha Shakyamuni taught, just over and over again. It's like a foundational practice for the entire path of liberation, like that mindfulness of body. Even if you didn't mention anything about why, in terms of having certain postures, just literally intentionally placing our posture or doing gestures or moving with a certain awareness of what am I doing now, staying in the present moment in that way, then it's exceptionally profound technique. It's very practical, very pragmatic, and don't even have to mention anything about this more subtle level of this more inner tantra level with the winds, but you don't really miss out on anything in the sense of if you're sitting as the Buddha instructed, and it doesn't give more of the intellectual side in a way of like why it works, why it's helpful, but you actually perform it, you engage it, you practice it, then the benefit's still there. Because it's so much more profound. I mean, Rinpoches very clearly say to actually apply the instruction, to actually perform it, to meditate, that's what it's all leading towards. And then if we understand why intellectually, that can be helpful. When we get in trouble, we get confused, or if we want to communicate to someone else, then it's good to have a clear intellectual understanding. But like cooking food is the whole point, and knowing menus and stuff is important. But to actually cook the food and eat it is the point. So in this way, it's very practical.
Taking the medicine.
Yeah.
They say when you do the mantra repetition, oh, what does this mean? What does that mean? They said, well, if you take the pill, you don't need to know all the different ingredients. It could relieve your allergies, even if you don't know what the different ingredients are. So it is similar. I like that metaphor a lot because it makes a lot of sense. Doesn't mean that it's not good or helpful to know exactly how, but like for example, one of the 7 points is like keep the eyes still, open in a certain way or focused in one direction. And that's something that in the Dzogchen teachings says so much, Like if wherever your eye looks, the tendency is just so strong to grab for the mind to follow where the movement. So it's a movement of the wind that's making everything move anyway, like all the movement in your body too, and it's connected with the movement of the mind. So if you're, especially for a beginner, if your mind is, if your body is moving a lot, then tends to mean, if less you have some degree of stability, then your mind is moving a lot too, and focused on like, just on those 4 foundations, just on the objects, instead of like the subject. Especially considering that they say like in the previous chapter when they talked about the channels of the winds and the essence elements in more detail, how our whole experience is caught up with these things. We can't really separate us, our sense of, self in a way from the channels and the winds and essence elements, because that's the way we perceive everything. Even they say in the previous one, like the white channel is more associated with appearance. The red channel is more associated with emptiness. And then mind is oftentimes, they say, if that had a location, the central channel, wisdom. Wisdom mind would be in the central channel. So it's totally related with this. I mean, even though they don't, in the previous chapter, Rinpoche talked more about that. But like Drogpa was saying, with like the karmic habit patterns, like of the karmic winds, it's just like almost totally overshadowed our wisdom. Like our wisdom winds of our actual, basically the central channel of in the heart center, oftentimes they said there's many different ways of seeing the central channel as the nature itself, as the nature of mind, all these different things, but everything's dispersed through the other channels, especially the red and white channels. So the breath purification totally helps expel all that karmic dualistic movement that's continually going through those channels all the time, and completely overpowering the wisdom that's sparking all the time too, because it's just moving throughout the channels and all the knots, and the channels are all messed up, and the movements are all duality mind, So by expelling the stale air, like someone told me a story too. They said when Rinpoche's father, Lama Chume, I think when he was maybe in the hospital, and he woke up to do practice like late at night, and immediately he does this exact breath purification that they say. And they said they were so surprised because they thought, oh, but that's like kind of like a beginner technique, or why, it's not that big a deal. But they said he always did that. And so many great masters, they all do that when they wake up in the morning before they go to sleep. Like expel the duality winds from the body, just exactly like they talked about here. Because otherwise, you have all this stale duality, karmic wind that's overshadowing your natural wisdom wind, So it's such a powerful technique, And we shouldn't think that it's not important or just, beginner's thing, I guess.
And so maybe we'll go into this second section on this more breath purification instructions that Khenpo Rinpoche give. and the really brief summary is that Rinpoche say after balancing one's body, the next is to balance the breathing or wind. And so during meditation in particular, the instruction is just to breathe normally. But then they say before beginning your morning practice session, after doing at least 3 prostrations and sitting in this correct posture that they described, then they ask us to do a breath purification to release the negative karmic winds related to our 3 poisons of ignorance, attachment, and anger. And then also this helps us to recognize and cultivate this wisdom wind that we have. And so the point of the breath purification is that we're clearing out our channels of all the impure, unbalanced wind energies so that our natural wisdom mind energy will naturally circulate throughout our body. And then we won't go in particular to the exact instructions of it because they're really so clear in this chapter, and we're welcome if there's questions and we talk. But really for the exact instructions, just read the chapter, it's the best. When Rinpoche say that once our channels and winds are more balanced, then our mind naturally settles more easily, becoming more calm and clear and fresh, and that these preparations of setting our posture into good balanced posture, clearing out the stale karmic winds, we're kind of recognizing or activating our wisdom winds. These are all essential preparations for inviting our own natural intelligence, our own wisdom to come, to be a part of our practice, to really flourish and activate. So that essentially is the whole chapter there. And then will you read that second topic point?
So this is from page 57, the first paragraph, and then also page 58, the last paragraph. There is a particular Dzogchen technique for breath purification that releases the inner air of the negative emotions. The 3 main emotions, often called the 3 poisons, are attachment, anger, and ignorance. By releasing the air connected with the 3 poisons, you can clarify your wind energy. Doing this exercise will help to clear the air of the emotions. When the emotion air is dispelled, at that moment wisdom air will appear more clearly. After doing this exercise to purify the breath, your mind will be clearer and calmer, and it will be easier to maintain your mind in the meditative state. Sounds good. Sounds like we should be doing this breath purification all the time. Yeah.
I know one thing that I think that I often forget with this breath purification is that because so much of the actual movement is to release the negative air, that Rinpoche, that sometimes I really forget to bring in the wisdom air too.
Yeah.
So it's not just expelling the stale air, it's also inviting and literally taking in the wisdom air to fill up our channels with this wisdom wind. So Rinpoche, Khenpo Rinpoche and Khenpo Rinpoche have definitely said very clearly that about this far around you is see that this 5-colored wisdom wind is in the space around you, and you literally breathe it in on the inhalation. And then, then as you expel, just as they described in this chapter, you expel those karmic winds. But just to not forget that we're not just cleaning the system, we're totally rejuvenating, reactivating so that everything is fully presently online and firing and all that. And then we can begin the practice with this vibrant, fresh, joyous, kind of uplifted approach. And literally saying on this subtle level, that it is totally rejuvenated, our body, this subtle body too.
And what does that mean? When we expel all the karmic duality winds, what's left? Wisdom winds, just like what they say. And they say, they didn't emphasize so much in here, but you should imagine from your whole previous lifetimes, all the anger that you ever experienced in all your past lifetimes up until this moment is totally purified and gone. And it's replaced by wisdom wind. And the same thing with attachment and the same thing with ignorance. But what does that mean? Our bodies are totally pure. That we're in the wisdom state. That our body is in the wisdom state. That our mind is in the wisdom state. That our speech is in the wisdom state. So it's totally connecting with that nature right off the bat. Not I am normal, ordinary me, with all my deluded junk, sitting down to do a practice that's totally separate from that. It's totally not the view that is actually this technique. This technique is like you're totally reconnecting with it, your own whole being of body, speech, and mind as a total unity, which even in the four empowerments, Guru Yoga, body, speech, mind, unity. You know, it's like we're totally connecting with that. And then we're meditating in that whole context so that our whole practice is in that context. And that way, we'll really develop confidence. You know, like, because that's what we're doing in practice. We're trying to recognize, I mean, that's what the Dzogchen teachings say, and that's what all the teachings say. To see that, and experience that, and know that. Not just like, okay, here we go again, my normal, deluded, depressed self is going to engage, you know? No, you know? Sit up straight, adopt a posture, and adopt a view. And within that, expel the negative air, the wisdom, duality air, and then do the whole practice in that state. I mean, I'm talking like I know, but I mean, it's such a good thing to like remember that that is the view, you know? That's what we are doing, you know?
And so I have a question then. So these are particular instructions for this formal meditation time. How we should sit with our body and how our wind should circulate ideally. So then when we get up after a session and we're not formally meditating but we're in this post-meditation, well then how does all this work then? Because we have these very particular, so you have your body in this position because it's ideal for things to circulate well. And then have your breathing in this particular way because it's ideal to have your mind be balanced. So then when we get up and walk and stand and lie down and all these other postures and we're using our speech, so our wind is not just naturally, it's like kind of using it, you know. So then how does that fit with this? So the question is meditation. These are very particular meditation instructions. So what is it, by hearing these instructions, what does it say about how do we practice in post-meditation too? When we're not in this posture, we're not doing this purification practice and as we're just talking or, you know, doing our usual daily life things. Is how do they fit together?
Where you mentioned the 4 foundations of mindfulness earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And the Buddha, he gave so many teachings on mindfulness as the foundation of all Dharma practice. When you're eating, you're aware that you're eating. When you take a bite of the apple, you're aware that you're taking a bite of the apple. When you're speaking, you're aware that you're speaking and what you're saying. When you're walking, generally they say, whether you're walking, sitting, speaking, or sleeping, right?
Standing, walking, lying.
Standing, walking, lying, and then speaking,
sitting.
And sitting. You're totally aware that you're doing that. So that's definitely tied in, at least from that foundation of, you know, recognizing what you're doing.
Because when we're up and about, we still have these channels and these winds and this mind. So whereas it's easier maybe to, when we're, you know, have this formal time set aside to really cultivate our awareness, our mind, you know. Because like in a formal meditation session, we set the posture, we set the breathing, and then just release it, let it be natural. And then the principal thing we're relating to is the mind, in a way. But then in a post-meditation, oftentimes we're so focused on what is the body doing, I have to eat, and what am I saying, and these outward things. So it's not so much focusing on the mind as it is the activities of the mind, the expressions of the body and the speech. And here, I think it's really beautiful, in one of these definitions here of post-meditation, Rinpoches said that during formal meditation, we learn how to rest in profound emptiness, the non-grasping state of non-duality. And during post-meditation, we learn how to continuously work with the richness qualities of mind, including love, compassion, and wisdom. This helps us maintain a balance between the absolute and relative aspects of awareness, enabling us to increasingly discover them both. So this is really valuable. Like while this chapter is really highlighting the formal component, it's not to say this less formal or post-meditation isn't important. It's essential. Like it's, in a way, it's this more outward, outreaching, relative aspect of the whole practice and of our mind, you know, of what we are. So,
and bottom line, if we don't do that, if we can't learn to do that when we're not meditating, and you practice 1 hour a day, which is great, that means 23 hours a day you're not practicing at all. You know, unless you bring this, like you were saying, unless we can learn how to focus on these things that you just said. You know, the post-meditative state of love, and compassion, and mindfulness, and that's kind of it's a true statement, but it's a little daunting, you know, if you think like, if we only think that we're practicing when we're on the cushion, we'll never attain enlightenment. You just can't do it, because it's like 1 hour of wisdom. Let's say your meditation is 100% perfect. Complete wisdom meditation, no duality. And then the other 23 hours is 100% duality. But anyway, that's not emphasizing the negative, it's just to say that like, we are whole beings, you know, we have these components all the time, so.
I mean, and also that question just makes me think about how through meditation practice we're trying to become more familiar with our mind. Like that's the whole point.
Yeah.
And so then we can see formal meditation practice, definitely so important, I mean always, but in the beginning it really helps us to really even recognize mind. What is mind at all? Like what are we talking about when we say mind?
Yeah.
And then, like, so the more we get this kind of idea of what that is, and then post-meditation, like, automatically we can start to see, like, oh, what is this mind that's carrying through everything? Like, whether I'm sitting here or doing all these other activities, you know, that's what we're hopefully, like, learning to not eventually make a distinction between them, you know, that because the mind is there always. You know? So anyway, just trying to think about how to link like formal meditation and then post-meditation, and yeah, they're doing different things, but like eventually it's the same, you know?
Yeah, really training to develop that realization, which is such a high level of realization, where meditation and post-meditation are the same. It's really high, but yeah.
And I mean, part of that was coming just from thinking about, like, in this term definition, just saying that, particularly in formal meditation, we're trying to connect with our the absolute level, our absolute nature, and then in post meditation, it's more the relative level of engaging and like trying to develop these qualities, the arising qualities of our mind, or the expressive qualities of our mind, but ultimately, again, like that we see that. And they say that all throughout this book, you know, and so many books and teachings talk about that, like trying to really use to see one and the other, to see the relative and the absolute and the relative. And so in that way, that's like the bridge, really. It's like bringing formal meditation into post-meditation. And it does, I think, just happen naturally as you do it more. But because we're more on the side as we begin, and we're more familiar with not meditating, or like not being familiar with our mind. It's really so important in the beginning, especially for, you know, till we get really stable, to be emphasizing, I think, a little more the formal side. I mean, that's just what I think. But
and if you look at these really exceptional masters like the Khenpo Rinpoches, and I mean so many other great masters, that they're just so highly realized and stable in their realization. And yet they spend so much time in formal meditation and in contemplation, like studying, investigating, analyzing. At least that's, I think, what we've seen, had the really fortunate opportunity to see that even if these great masters that have totally blended in their meditation and post-meditation experiences, they still spend so much time, like the first Kensei Rinpoche or the first Control, I mean, they spend so much time doing these expressive, outreaching, compassionate activities, but also on the cushion. Really, Milarepa's final teaching to Gampopo was to show how calloused his bottom and his legs are. It's like if you, in Lama Chimin too, he says it's better to wear out one cushion than hundreds of pairs of shoes.
Yeah, I like that.
It's really like, formal practice is so important.
Yeah.
These are great masters. These are really pith wisdom words, you know. So it's good, and these is maybe, like you said, simple techniques. They may sound simple, but it's because they're profound. These have been passed down for centuries, thousands of years.
And they work.
That's
why if they didn't work, people wouldn't gain realization by using them. But obviously that's not the case, because all these great masters use them.
Yeah.
So how should we see the relative when we're in post meditation? According to the
final summary point. Yeah. So go ahead. Sorry.
How should we see the relative in a post meditative state?
Really, it's an opportunity for bodhisattva activity, in a way, as an illusion, as a dreamlike expression. Nothing we're trying to avoid, nothing we're trying to really... Try not to hold on to it as a substantially existent, real thing that we have to defend against or grab onto. So it's constantly in flux, constantly flowing, totally dynamic, just like this is the mind. This is a reflection of mind. This is just like a dream experience that's happening in my mind. To try to see it fluidly, so that the meditation that we have on the cushion really is incorporated into post-meditation. This is just really it is like, that's what they're trying to say. Meditation isn't just some small technique we apply and just when everything's just right and it's nice. But meditation is the approach to try to constantly be actively available to any experience or anything that might happen. And just try to stay open and fresh and engage it and not close up and shut down and get defensive and all about me. I mean, that's the point. And that's like a seamless blend. These great masters of meditation and post-meditation. Trying to...
Vajrayana is the same post-meditation. You see everything like a dream, just compassionate.
I mean, I think this is going. We should really conclude. But Vajrayana is seeing more, not so much as a dream to say, but this. I mean, this says a lot, but that it's more. It's already pure. It's already totally complete. It's not just an illusory, dynamic experience, but it's like a 100% pure, perfect display of the natural inherence or natural awareness that is the source, the ever-abiding source of all things that are ever happening. You know. So that this is all a dynamic display of enlightened beings and doing enlightened activities, and we're there too as the center, and on their side they're the center, and it's all this already perfectly complete like celebration of the true nature that we all share. So it's not just a dream that could be good, could be bad. It's a total beautiful celebration of the nature that is always perfect. But so in that sense, it's all wisdom, wind, and I mean, there's just so many teachings on all these things, but that's it.
Practice.
Yeah. Apply. So thanks. We'll just do a very brief silent meditation and then dedicate the merit. Swasti Vidzayantu Chosun Sasun Chidu Pema Jun Yin Sode Duje Dujinji Kenshin Balin Sherab Jubeku Nojo Dendro Zezan Dajin Shok Om Swasti Choku Nanta Lonku Cherezin Choku Bajum Yabyum Duje Du Pela pasang jajo yang siga, dendro bende dandu nu shashong. Kanri rawe kowe zinkamsu, bendan dewa malu juwe ne. Chere ziwan denzin jatsu yin, jabe gaje badu denjo jing. Om swasti, sewang rinzin beme jin abjin. Dunyin Jube La San Nordena, Shejun Golo Sunji Bajute, Zanchen Nanda Jule Nam Jan Sho. By this merit, may all obtain omniscience, may it defeat the enemy wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings.